My name is Jordan Glasgow, Senior Product Manager here at Dolby, and I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Nick Rives of Capitol Studios. He mixed, among other things, that Glass Animals track that you just heard. Also Bob Marley, Billie Eilish, and James Blake, and many more in Dolby Atmos. So, Nick, we're really glad to have you here today.
Very happy to be here, and thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's start with an easy question. What was your first experience hearing Dolby Atmos in a studio, and how was that for you?
Oh, man. I mean, transformative would be the short answer. 2017, Capitol Studio C, we were told about this new technology, this new experience, Dolby Atmos, immersive experience. And so we were curious about how we could build a studio facility that met the expectations of music mixing, right? Near field. At that point, Atmos was primarily a theatrical experience, right? And so where we were seeing that technology was in dub stages and, movie theaters being the, end goal. And so, what we did at Capitol was build a facility that met with the criterion of a music mixing space, right? So we brought the side speakers came down, ear height, everything was near field, everything was closer to us, and it started to feel like what we're all kind of used to. You're sitting at a console, you've got speakers with intimate access. And it kind of went from there, right? So the next thing I knew, Greg Penny came by. And he pulled up a mix he'd been working on that was Elton John's Rocket Man, a mix that I referred to as the mix that launched 1,000 chips. Such an incredibly compelling experience. It immediately, in those days, I would kind of show Atmos to people, and I would just stop talking and I would just play that mix. And then after that, I'd be like, so let's talk about what you just heard, rather than me talking about all of this technology, because it's just like we're here for the music, right? And so that's the experience that we're meant to have. So, and then it just kind of went from there. We had REM came in and we did Automatic for the People for the 25th anniversary release. For that we had Scott Litt and Cliff Norrell, so we had the original crew. And then from there, it just grew and grew, and the next thing you know, it was like, let's experiment with this. Let's try this genre. Oh, there's a new version of the renderer. Let's experiment with that. Oh, there's this thing called headphones that people like. So let's figure that out too. And now it's the majority of my work. I mean, I've spent the last 4 years doing basically nonstop Atmos mixing, all day, all the time.
That's amazing. Take us through like a recent mix that you did, start to finish. How did you set up the objects and the beds and treatment? Kind of walk us through it.
Absolutely. So, as some of you likely know, the resources that the Dolby platform offers are divided into beds and objects. Beds are like traditional multi-channel outputs, and objects are like channels on a console, represent an infinite possibility and opportunity. So seeing that as the major advantage of what the renderer has to offer, and seeing the beds as being kind of more representative of the past, I've long since moved out of the beds, right? So I'm 100% objects all the time, because I feel it gives me the best opportunity to really take advantage of what the RMU is capable of doing. It gives me the greatest opportunity to explore the nuances of the binaural platform. So, rendering each different voice or instrument to a different externalization distance, off, near, mid, or far. By leaning on the objects, it becomes what I think is the most kind of advanced opportunity to take advantage of what the renderer is capable of doing, right? So for me, I'm all objects all the time. And when it comes to my actual mixing practices, I try to approach every project differently, right? Like sometimes I've had early conversations with people and they're like, well, what do you do with guitar? I'm like, I have no idea, right? What is that guitar doing in the song, right? If it's Bob Marley's Redemption song, it's doing something different than if it's Metallica, where, and therefore it should be presented in a different way, right? So 100% of my decision making is compositionally oriented, right? Where something goes, how it moves, how those relationships are established. It is my purpose to present the musical expression in the most meaningful way. It is not my job to exploit everything that the Dolby platform has to offer, right? At the end of the day, you should be listening to a record because of the music, not because of what some nerd in some basement like myself did, right? So,
Your basement happens to be Capitol Records, though.
Capitol Studio C is not a bad basement, but there are still no windows, and you know what I mean? It's not about me, right? It's what I'm getting to is it's not about me, it's about the music, right? So all of those decisions, all of that, the kind of the logical breakdown of how to utilize all of the incredible opportunities that Atmos has, it's to serve the music, it's to serve the narrative, you know? So the first thing I do with a mix is learn the composition, right? Typically, I'm given either stems or multi-tracks. And so the first thing to do is some compositional analysis. You know, what is it that's going on? How do we get from bar one, beat one to the finale? What is it that I'm meant to feel in this music? You know what I mean? If you're doing, you know, Tiesto or you know, some high-impact EDM where stimulus and energy and movement is the purpose, well, that sets me on my path to create a certain type of experience. But if it's a singer-songwriter or a ballad or, you know, something where it's meant to be more introspective, more of a mood, then that sets me on a totally different path, right? That is the beauty of music, and I have the luxury of working on a wide array of different musical experiences. So in the last couple weeks, I have worked on some Bob Marley. So we're talking about, you know, legacy material with which people have an incredibly intimate relationship and understanding. So that gives me a huge responsibility, right? And as we all learned from Tobey Maguire, with great power comes great responsibility. So I have to focus myself on what is the story and what is the experience that is being put forth by Bob Marley and the Wailers. How do those mixes live in our minds? And how can I honor that expression in a meaningful way that doesn't deviate from our relationship to these incredible recordings and performances, but also offers us a new and compelling experience that would enable us to explore Atmos outside of the stereo experience that we've lived with for 50 years.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about how you are bouncing back and forth between speakers and headphones when you're mixing and getting one mix that translates to both those environments.
Totally critical and radically challenging at times, right? You know, I mean, something that we've all, you know, it's nothing new to us who mix music that you have to, you know, create a mix that satisfies the known and unknown playback environments. You know what I mean? You could have a mix sound great at Capitol, and what's it going to sound like at NAMM? What's it going to sound like in my car? What's it going to sound like on headphones, right? So Atmos, of course, offers a variety of additional challenges on top of that, right? So a workflow that I have found that works well for me is to start in headphones, and I always have whatever my reference mix is in my DAW session, right? So the stereo master, so that I know what it is that I'm working against or working towards, you know, whatever the case may be, and then I start working from there, right? So I'm already in headphones, which if you start in speakers with Atmos and then go to headphones, it can be a radical challenge, right? You can find yourself going up against you know, expectations that you've set in speakers that headphones aren't necessarily capable of delivering in the same way. I'm a firm believer in what binaural is capable of. I think it's an incredible opportunity to expand on the headphone experience, but it involves nuances that decisions you might make only in speakers might work against some of those challenges, but successful binaural mixes can translate to speakers in a very linear and comfortable way. So I find it's a little bit more efficient a process to start in headphones and then move my way out into speakers. Plus, you get that incredibly satisfying moment where you just, you know, unmute the speakers, put the cans down, and let loose, and it's just like most of the time incredibly rewarding. You know?
That's super interesting. I know you've been checking out our personalized headphone rendering technology, and we're one of the early adopters of that. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's right on the other side of this wall. You can go get a demo. But this allows you to scan your own head and use that for your binaural rendering. So talk a little bit about that and how it helps you, or how it helps you achieve a better headphone mix.
100%. So all of the binaural experience is based on this HRTF technology, right? Head-related transfer function. I didn't know any of this crap until I started working with Dolby, right? I was just this, you know, stereo, right? 2 speakers, 2 ears, great, rock and roll, you know? But it turns out that our whole experience of, you know, how we hear sound is the relationship between our ears and our brains and our physiology, right? Like, you know, why I look different than you do is also why you hear slightly differently than I do. This is all totally new and cool information to me. So, you know, it was a really kind of interesting thing to explore how that translates, why, when I hear something in Atmos and then you hear the same thing with the same set of headphones, you have a different experience. I had to kind of understand that there's a lot of technology behind why that's the case. So one of the fascinating developments that Dolby and the team have put together is this personalized headphone related transfer function, PHRTF, which takes into consideration my physiology, right? I've spent my entire life learning how to hear sound wrap around my cheekbones. So if there's a possibility to anticipate that topography in my headphone experience, it can allow me to hear in a more accurate and realistic way, or it will break down the difference between my brain's decoding of what my ears are receiving and my, consciousness' ability to understand what that means. There's a lot of really high-end stuff going on there, but the reality is that we all hear differently and it's a complex situation. And we're basically trying to fool the brain into hearing something that it otherwise is not hearing, right? It's like looking at a three-dimensional image on a two-dimensional piece of paper. That's a radical oversimplification. However, I have found it to be an incredibly helpful thing for me to understand the value of this relationship. So for me, I've had various different interpretations of the PHRTF. It started with this LiDAR scan, and of course I got to get my beard down and wear a swim cap and do all these kind of things, and and they get this really interesting kind of virtual generation. And then we worked our way towards how we can now do it with a phone, which is this funny process. You put your phone up, get in a swivel chair and spin. I have found that the swivel chair is your friend on the PHRTF situation. So you can sit there and spin around and it creates this, image of you. But what all of that does is it allows you to then get an HRTF profile that's tuned to your physiology. And you might think to yourself, okay, great, that will help me, but what about my listeners? What about that one mix to rule them all concept? And my response to that is, think about it like someone built for you a set of speakers that are exactly for you. It's like you've had a tailored, you've got a tailored suit of the binaural experience that just allows you to do your job to the best of your ability, right? And then, at that point, it gives you that opportunity to express the Atmos mix in headphones, in with the most access to what it is that you're doing, the experience that you're crafting, and then that will work its way down the line, right? That will make its way to the listeners, regardless of what platform they're listening on, whatever headphones they're listening on. I have no control over that, nor do I want that responsibility. But I want to ensure that I have the best opportunity to create something that's going to translate, right? So,
yeah.
So the PHRTF for me is, it's an invaluable tool, right? It is, like I said, I start all my mixes in headphones, and it's right there with the PHRTF. And I work at a commercial studio. So, my colleagues, they have their PHRTF. So, you go in the room, you fire up the renderer, I load the, Nick Rives version, and when I leave, I try and clear it when I leave, like zeroing a desk, good etiquette. And then, the next mixer will put their PHRTF in and load that up. You know what I mean? So it's a great way to have customization, but also not have that be, I'm not carrying those speakers around with me. I have, it's just a file I can load on any platform. Anyone 3.7 and newer, I get the opportunity to explore that expression. So it's just another way to allow you to have the best, access to that landscape and make the most meaningful, mix for you, and it also helps ease some of the challenges when you're learning how to listen to binaural. If y'all are Atmos mixers and, especially if you're starting out, the best thing I can say about binaural is log the hours. Your brain will learn how to hear it. Your brain will learn how to listen to it, and the next thing you know, you'll be able to express yourself in a very meaningful way. So the PHRTF is just another really helpful tool in that process, in that discovery, because for all of it, you could be a incredible mixer with a closet full of Grammys. PHRTF and binaural is a new experience. There's learning to do, so if you can allow yourself to log those hours, do that time. And also, again, I know I keep saying the same thing, but if you start your mixes in headphones, you can address those challenges from a blank slate perspective. You're not comparing them to a speaker experience you've already curated. So I think it just allows for a better synergy and a healthier relationship to the headphone experience. And we know 40% of people are listening to their music on headphones at any given moment, right?
Very true.
So it's critical that experience is meaningful, right? Yeah. It's I'm not going to say easy, but the path to a compelling Atmos speaker experience is relatively unhindered, right? Yeah. But the headphone experience requires a little bit more investigation, a little bit more nuances. But I guarantee you that the outcome of that experimentation is a very meaningful mix experience. and it will influence every aspect of your mixing. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's switch gears over to mastering.
Okay.
I know you're not a mastering engineer.
I am not.
But let's talk about how mastering is different for Atmos versus stereo. How mastering in a DAW for Atmos is, really powerful and also a bit challenging. And then you've also been a tester of our Dolby Atmos Album Assembler that we're previewing over here, a new mastering tool for Dolby Atmos. So how does the Album Assembler help with some of those challenges for mastering?
Absolutely. Enormous conversation to be had about that, right? And some of you know this if you've experimented with mixing in Atmos, is that you have to do some unlearning and some relearning, right? It is fundamentally a different thing. And that's part of what's so exciting about it, right? It offers us all of these new opportunities and also offers us new challenges. And as a mixer, just speaking from my personal experience, it is a discipline that requires exploration, experimentation, failure, and overcoming those experiences in order to really find a way to express yourself in a meaningful way. And I think a big challenge for us as a larger community is that, us as mixers have had the opportunity to break those eggs and make those omelets for years now, and the Atmos mastering community hasn't had the same opportunity to explore that until more recently. And there are some incredibly innovative mastering engineers I've had the privilege of working with who have come up with, like I say, progressive and advancing, the idea of what it is to master. And that's the challenge that I put out to anyone who's, embarking on their journey for mastering in Atmos. This is a different task. This is a different discipline. We can't do what we've done before, and expect the same results, right? So, then the challenge becomes, how do we do that, right? What are our avenues to explore that? And up until very recently, we've only really had the same resources that you have to mix that you have to master, right? You're in a DAW like Pro Tools. I'm a Pro Tools user, and you can only really approach it from a sort of micro level, right? In stereo, we're mixing with the trees, and then we give the forest to the mastering engineer, right? And they're looking at a one package situation. Whereas with Atmos, until recently, you don't have that opportunity. You have to give them, all of those different nuances, which basically turns it into mixing round two. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just to open you up to some of those challenges, right? So, what we've been doing with Dolby, and what you've been doing and what I've been, had the privilege to help work on is provided an ecosystem that allows us to get that relationship back where, I can be in the weeds with, 100 objects, and that, I can hand that to a mastering engineer who can look at it as one mix, right? That's doing what Atmos does best, which is scale and shift and evolve to the platform that it's being actualized on in that moment, whether it's 5.1 or, 13.1.8 or something, something like that, right? So, it's one mix to do all of those things. How can we look at it as one platform? So a tool set that Dolby has developed that I've had the privilege to help work on is the album assembly and mastering platform, right? Which allows us to, at a more in a much more accessible way, bring our Atmos ADMs into one DAW-like ecosystem. And when we can address things like relative level, relative EQ experience curves, some dynamic shaping, right? You can't limit in the same way the Atmos experience that you can stereo. And by limit, I mean actual limiting, right? The dynamic threshold, the energy dispersion around the space is a constant variable, and therefore those limitations don't exist in the same way. And therefore we need a progressive way to think about it. So, what the team at Dolby has been able to do is create a platform that allows us to load in ADMs, do crossfades, do relative balances, get back into that album assembly concept, which until now has been a very cumbersome process of bringing ADMs back into Pro Tools and, maintaining your binaural metadata. Well, you can't automate that, so you have to commit to a binaural profile, which is something that we've worked on. And, all of that is doable, but it's cumbersome and challenging, and this offers us a solution to move forward and to further evaluate the reality of what it means to master in Atmos, right?
Yeah.
And I find that to be a very valuable experience, especially when you're doing big projects, big records, where you have gapless transitions, right? It's very difficult to navigate gapless transitions in Atmos, but there are opportunities to explore relationships to make that easier, to make it a more musical process with less. As long as the more we can do to eliminate the technical hoops to jump through and get back to the emotional and musical experience, the better off we all are. So having a tool set that enables us to explore that is incredibly valuable, and I've enjoyed working on it, and I continue to look forward to the opportunities that it will present.
Yeah,
to
we
us.
really appreciate your feedback on the tool, and we don't have crossfades quite yet. We have fade-ins and fade-outs.
See, but that's what I'm talking about.
Crossfades
Those seeds,
are,
you know what I mean? Like, it's
we
a big
want to
deal.
do it, and
I know
we hope
we'll
to
get
do
there.
it soon.
We'll get there. Absolutely, right? But we got to we got to understand the entire scope of the challenge, and then it's just tackle one thing at a time until we get there, right? I mean, how else can anything be achieved?
Exactly, one step at a time. Talk about some of the things that you have to do to deliver an Atmos mix to a streaming service in terms of like the Atmos files have to match the stereo in terms of length and loudness and things like that.
Of course. So as I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, the way the service providers give us the Atmos experience is very convenient, but it also offers us, the flexibility of going from stereo to Atmos depending on your ecosystem, right? So if I say I want to listen to Bob Marley's Exodus, wherever I am and whatever my system is connected to, it can decide for me depending on my choices if I'm listening to stereo or to Atmos. And so in order for that ecosystem to exist, there are some pretty firm, not guidelines, but like basically rules to allow that ecosystem to exist in such an effortless way. One of those, of course, is that the start and end time of both mixes need to be identical, right? So the stereo mix and the Atmos mix need to have almost to the frame the same length, so that it can all sync up, so that as the service provider switches those files or the source material, you get a comparable experience. Or like if you've got like the it's going to a music video or to a lyric video or something like that, it all needs to line. All of those other aspects to music consumption need to be available whether you're in Atmos or stereo. So that's part one. Part two, of course, are the delivery specs, right? -18 integrated LUFs, which of course we love. We get our dynamic range. We get to, really explore, the opportunities to expand, to go from intimate to bombastic and back.
Yeah, how has Atmos kind of changed the loudness situation versus stereo where we had the loudness wars? What's different about Atmos than that?
My personal opinion is that Atmos has really broken down the PTSD of the loudness wars that we've all experienced, right? We finally have gotten back to a place where we can have, like I say, intimate versus, I won't use the word quiet because I know it's like a bad word, but intimate verses and bombastic choruses, right? I was at Spoon last night at the Palladium up in Hollywood, great rock band from Austin, and I say that like they aren't really popular, but anyway, you're dancing and you're feeling it, and it's like that live experience. And I'm not saying that the studio experience needs to be the live experience, but there are things about what's the most important things about musical, the musical experience, what really moves our hearts, gets our blood pumping, which, I've been limping around all day because I was dancing a little too hard, but that's a good thing. That's what music is supposed to do. And what I think, something that has been incredibly inspirational for me in terms of what Atmos has given us in that, in the landscape of the musical experience, is the opportunity to get back into a world where we explored those dynamic pendulum swings, right? You're leaning in for that emotional, dry, intimate solo vocal, and then all of a sudden the choir comes in, and and the organ kicks in, and it's big and larger than life, and you can't help but be moved, right? It's not optional at that point. That dynamics play a huge role in that, and so being able to operate with the incredible headroom of -18 integrated really allows us to explore that. Now, of course, you can't lose things. There's still the practical opportunity of like, okay, I'm at the gym, I'm at NAMM, I don't want to lose that verse, and I don't want to be riding the volume all day, but with some practice and some, involved experiences, you can get to a place where you can solve for both things. So from a loudness perspective, I adore what Atmos has to offer for us in that way. I have the privilege of working on the Billie Eilish albums. And so like Happier Than Ever, the title track Happier Than Ever, has this perfect 3-act composition that goes from like literally like, high-strung guitar and whisper vocal to like this insane power waltz section with blown up guitars and blown up drums, and like being able to go through that step, and really get the advantage of what that incredible composition has to offer, Atmos just gives me an opportunity to express that in such a meaningful way, where you are like blown away by the time the big section kicks in.
Yeah,
you know?
I fully agree.
You know what I'm saying?
I fully agree. What? Give us a secret weapon plugin that you love to use on an Atmos mix.
Oof.
Divulge your
That's
secrets
tough.
to us.
So I'm not a believer in secret sauce, right? I think that if I'm sitting in front of if I'm sitting at a Neve 88, it's going to sound different than you sitting in front of that same 88, right?
Yeah, it definitely is.
I mean, I like that, but you know what I'm saying, though, right? Like we all have our own instincts and our own subtleties. So I'm happy to share anything with you. Very much the majority of my work, I am taking a body of work or a piece of work that was written or composed and mixed in stereo first, right? Now, I am incredibly excited about the opportunity for that relationship to evolve. But as it exists today, it's very common that I'm mixing from stems that already have all of the, the taste and, like the textures, the EQs, the reverbs, if it's as specific as that or as broad as just the tonality of it, why they chose to use a Telecaster, all of those great decisions have already been made. So at that point, it is my responsibility to live up to the relationships that have already been established, right? It's not, this isn't for me to make, okay, cool, great, but I'm going to throw this through a Fairchild and get Decapitator out, and God knows I use Decapitator on every mix I ever do. But because of that relationship, I lean very heavily on the Fab Filter suite because they're incredibly powerful, but offer the opportunity for a certain tonal transparency or dynamic opportunity transparency, right? Like if you configure Pro C the right way, you damn near can't hear it, but it's really putting in the work.
I love those plugins. I really do.
And they're pretty light load, so you can really just load them up. So that's a great tool set for me because I'm trying to stay out of the way of the tonal decisions and relationships that have been established in the stereo, because that was the artist's first expression of their material, right? Yeah. Now, when it comes to a time when I'm sitting with an artist and mixing, from scratch to Atmos, and I'm no longer in a position to make good on a stereo experience that already exists. At that point, I go into my world of UAD. I'm a huge UAD user because I was, raised in a legacy studio, Capitol. That's the tool set I'm most intimately familiar with. So, if I, want that 33609 flavor, I know I can get it from that platform. So
cool.
So, but understanding that how you're approaching your relationship to the Atmos task at hand changes and shifts the type of plugins that I may choose to use, because I want to either stay out of the way or rebuild that mix, right? So I said Fab Filter because I'm staying out of the way. The Bob Marley stuff I'm mixing off of multi-track tapes. So then it's like you go the other way. You look up what studio they mixed that in. Okay, they were on a Helios console. Let me get that Helios EQ. Okay, they had an EMT 140. Let me get the 140 out.
Interesting.
So that I can, make good on those decisions, right? But then again, once you get into new material, unreleased material where the stereo mix is still a variable, then you get to do your thing, right? You get to do your stuff. You get to get out all the cool whatever plugins you love to use, right? And there's no wrong answer under that situation, right? So, but the nature of the way the Atmos work exists today, there are a lot of different types of sort of modus operandi to adhere to as you're navigating the job, right? The job that I've been asked to do. So honestly, a lot of those types of decisions, the processing, the reverbs, those things, they're dependent on the nature of the task that's been put in front of me.
Totally makes sense. All right, we got time for one more question.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you, well, we have a lot of users here that want to get into mixing Dolby Atmos for the first time.
Do it.
What's your recommendation for somebody getting started? We now know that Pro Tools is offering Atmos in their studio version, so somebody can get into it for $299 for the first year. And you can buy, if you're a Pro Tools user, you can buy the production suite for $99 right now. So what advice do you have for people getting into it for the first time?
Well, I mean, as far as everything you just said about packages and platforms and things like that, I don't really speak to that because I think we should all find our own way. I have been a Pro Tools user my entire professional career, so it's the ecosystem with which I am the most comfortable. But it is my understanding that, Logic and Cubase
Logic, Cubase, Nuendo.
All offer great opportunities. So I would say don't think there's a way you need to do it. Start with a platform that offers you the most comfort and familiarity. right? If you're a Logic user, start there. If you're a Pro Tools user, start there. If you're a Nuendo user, start there, and God help you. I'm just kidding. No, Nuendo's dope. Nuendo's dope. Honestly, I would start with some listening, right? Get on Tidal, Amazon, Apple Music, whatever is your platform of choice. Although I would probably suggest Tidal and Amazon simply because they acknowledge the binaural metadata. So I think that's very meaningful. And listen to stuff that's available that you know and that you like, and identify what it is that you like or don't like about certain Atmos mixes, and then explore the opportunity that that has for you to, you know, then create your own voice in the medium, your own voice in the platform, right? Oh, I really like the way the, you know, St. Vincent record works. I say that because I just saw Mert, who's dope, and I think he's up next, so stick around for him because he's amazing. You know, and then identify what it is you like about that, and then explore creating that in your own experiences, right? Or if you hear a mix that you think, oh, you know, that's not how I would have imagined that song would sound, try and come up with a, you know, an explanation to yourself as to why that exists, so that you can find your own voice in the platform. And then at that point, like anything having to do with the work that we do as mixers and engineers, you got to do it, right? You could read every book ever written about recording a drum set, and then you put the mics up and it's like, this is not what I read about. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to do the job in order to understand and find your own voice, right? So my bottom line advice is start with what you know and just go for it, right? Just don't hold back. However your personality manifests itself in the work that you do, lean into that, right? Nothing about Atmos means that there are rules, restrictions, or regulations. If anything, it's a wider, more open opportunity than any other format that you could explore. So just do you, be you, express yourself in the medium, right? Right now, it's an open world, you know, and what I'm waiting for is someone to show up, kick the doors open, and be like, no, try this, and move the needle again, right? Because, you know, you're either working against something you've done in the past, or you're looking to the future. And I'm just say, go for it. I just say, be yourself and express it and explore it, and then send me your mix so I can hear it and go, oh man, this guy really knows what's going on. She did a really amazing thing. They've done something incredible. So you know what I mean? Like, get out there and make me mix differently because of something that you bring to the table, right? That's what I want to see from the community. So my advice is just go for it. You know, don't hold back. Be you. Do the thing.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for coming by and
my
sharing
pleasure.
your wisdom with us.
100%.
Thank you guys
Thank you
for
so
being
much
here.
for coming out. David,
See you around.
Awesome.